Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to you from very rainy, cloudy, and gloomy Singapore. And a very good morning to you if you are in Europe, and a very good evening to you if you are joining from Australia, which one of our speakers is joining from for today. We are very happy that all of our individual presentations for cross-faculty dialogue phase went well, and today we are at the end of this phase. And today we will have the final round of presentations with round 6 speakers for the 17th ASEF Classroom Network on learning about AI and learning with AI. So quick reminder for the session format and agenda. We will go right into the presentations today. We have 6 speakers, so we need to be also very strict with time as well. We have presentations from Australia, China, Korea, and United Kingdom today. We will have question and answer session related to the presentations after every presentations for Australia, China, and Korea. And for United Kingdom, we will take Q&A after all the presentations are done. And then, of course, we will remind you about what to expect next, and also the cross-faculty project proposal development reminder. And then also we will stop very briefly if you have any generic questions related to project proposal development or about the project in general. So reminder again for the questions that our speakers will be addressing today. How does your institution approach learning about AI and learning with AI? And then for the second question, which specific aspects of AI do you consider most crucial to address in teacher education at this moment? So today we will start with Europe. So our first speaker will be Dr. Lavinia Hirsu from University of Glasgow, United Kingdom. And then we will have Dr. Gabriela Rodrigo after Dr. Lavinia Hirsu. And then we will have the closing speaker from Europe will be Dr. Mr. Donesh Dustin Hussaini, also from University of Glasgow. And then we will move on to our Asian speakers. Our first speaker from Asia will be Dr. Selina M.G. Nemorin from Monash University, Australia. And then our next speaker from Asia will be Dr. Guang Chen from Beijing Normal University, China. And then our last speaker for today, and also the last speaker from Asia, will be Dr. Hyusun An from Gwangju Office of Education, Korea. So without further ado, let's invite our first speaker for today, Dr. Lavinia Hirsu from University of Glasgow, United Kingdom. Lavinia, the floor is yours to share your screen.
Thank you, Jyoti. I'll just share my screen in a second, and you can confirm if you can see it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for making the time to join the session. For me, it was a mixture of catching up with the sessions online, coming to the sessions and watching the recordings as well. So thanks for arranging that, Jyoti. But thanks a lot for those of you who have come in person to this session. I am a senior lecturer in the School of Education at the University of Glasgow, and I will not provide, a very full and detailed profile of the university. I'll just highlight a couple of things that I think are important, and then other things may come up in the Q&A. The University of Glasgow is one of the 24 Russell Group universities, and what that means is that it's recognized as one of the research-intensive institutions. So there is a focus on teaching and pedagogy within our school, but also on the research on teaching and pedagogy. So we're research into various areas related to education is fairly important. Our university from the beginning has taken an open and proactive attitude towards artificial intelligence. And while there are a couple of tensions in the guidance that has been provided to researchers and teachers at the university, there are also very clear guidelines as to the position of the university. And I thought I would start with some of these specific guidelines. From the perspective of the university, artificial intelligence tools are recognized as both transformative and disruptive. And this is clearly articulated in the university position. as well as the idea that rather than seeking to prohibit students' use of these tools, what the university hopes to do is to support students in learning how to use these tools effectively, ethically, critically, and transparently. And I think that all these four terms have appeared in many of the presentations that other colleagues have shared from across the world. There's also the recognition that our students will graduate in an AI augmented world. Therefore, we need to prepare them for their world. We need to make sure that they are able to navigate it. Also, the university thinks that it's important to develop critical thinking, analytical skills, decision making, and good judgment through the use of AI. Now, of course, there is a gap between saying that we want students to develop all these skills and how we actually get there. And I think that the how is the aspect that we still, together as a research and teaching community, we still need to think about. But one of the other important positions of the university is that catching cheating through the use of AI is a misplaced effort. And instead of catching cheating, when we know very well that some of the current tools are not very good at catching cases of plagiarism or misuse, the university says that we probably need to invest more in helping our students to understand how to use these tools responsibly. Now, in the guidance, we are also provided with a couple of use case scenarios, and I thought that these might be useful to share, just to give you an idea about the many ways in which we can start thinking about how we can integrate these tools. One would be to attribute AI in student work. So the encouragement from the institution is that whenever there is use of AI tools, students should acknowledge the use of these tools. But the same guidelines also says that many referencing styles do not provide specific instructions on how to cite tools. So you can see the tensions here between what the ambition is and actually what we can do at this moment when we are still trying to figure out how to make sense of these tools and how to implement them. We can also support the students to generate content produced by AI, and also with the idea of critiquing it. So if we are to engage with these tools, then let's also figure out how we include reflection and critique of the content produced by these tools. One of the important aspects is that a lot of the guidance that has come up from the University of Glasgow is the result of work done from people in assessment. So a lot of the guidance and concerns are around how we use AI for assessment. And the university says that it supports the integration of specific aspects into the assessment of student work. We can also look at cases where students work in groups to explore, for instance, a topic with using AI tools. And again, they can reflect and provide on the content produced by AI tools. But at the same time, there is the recognition that, some of our colleagues may need more time to upskill, in which case they shouldn't feel pressure to integrate AI tools because these may require a little bit more development and thinking time. So again, I think that what I'm trying to highlight is that while the general direction of the University of Glasgow is to support in some shape or form the critical and reflective use of artificial intelligence, there are also tensions and areas that need further development. And I want to talk a little bit about some of these tensions because I think that they have emerged also from our previous conversations. So the first one is that a lot of the response, whether positive or negative, is responding to what is happening now or yesterday, rather than what's to come. So a lot of the critiques is that, well, AI is unable to do X. And yes, the answer is it's unable to do now, but things are changing very fast. So the question is, what are we responding to? And do we understand these tools well enough? It's also a lot of the reactions, either in the public media or, in conversations with colleagues, it's a little bit all or nothing. So there's this assumption that AI transforms everything, or AI will not transform anything. And I think that the productive space is in thinking about to what extent AI will make an impact. So it's not, we cannot just say don't use it because our students are already using it. But also we cannot assume that it will be used for everything. So the question is, how do we develop a robust understanding of these tools and how do we integrate them in what we do? Now, interestingly enough, there is a section in the guidance from the University of Glasgow that talks about how we talk to our students about the use of AI. And I just wanted to give you an extract here, just to give you an idea of the tensions within the discourse that we use. So some of the things that are said is that artificial intelligence is designed to mimic human writing. It works like autocomplete. It doesn't actually understand concepts. It's relatively superficial. Now, if you look at all these 4 points, it's a clear no. Why would you use it? Not good at all. So you can see how, again, while the university says that we should have a proactive and think about these tools reflectively, there is a tension in how we understand and then talk about these tools. So there's more work to be done in this space. I want to turn now to wrap up my presentation to the last point, which is where am I interested in areas of development and where I see the potential for development. Now, my background is tied to research in multilingualism. So for me, one of the important questions is how can AI sustain the integration of multiple languages, and can it? And what is the impact on learners who do not speak English, for instance, as their mother tongue? What does that mean in terms of language development? Another aspect which is related to my role as director of postgraduate research is how can AI be used for research brainstorming, for literature review development, for generation of ideas and strengthening of argumentation? And again, can it? Because I work with doctoral students. So, and from conversations, I know that they are already using a wide range of tools that are AI powered. And then how can we understand and deploy the generative aspect of AI in effective and ethically responsible ways? And I put in quotation marks the generative because I think at the moment, there are a lot of questions and concerns around what is actually meant by generative and what does being generative mean within the context of AI content production. The last 2 points here, one is about AI for generic use. So, I see a lot of people who use AI for generic questions in the same way they use Google search. But there's also, if we're starting digging a little bit more around the notion of prompt engineering, there is the potential to develop prompt engineering skills and tools that are more individually targeted. So this distinction between the general and the individual is an interesting area for me. And finally, I'm very much interested in this area of discourses and of guidelines and institutional policies, because I think we are at an interesting point where institutions are trying to understand how to navigate this space. But as you have seen from our own guidance, there are still many areas of research and development. So I'll wrap it up here and I'll pass it over to Gabriela.
And thanks, Lavinia, for this scenario, because it opens up also to the opportunity to talk about what is really important at the moment in teacher education when it comes to generative AI and what we are doing at the School of Education. I'm Gabriela Rodolico, Senior Lecturer in Science Education at the University of Glasgow. And I think that I want just to point out 2 important points that we are doing at the moment. As Lavinia said, this is the time for discussions. This is really the time to take some action that is more based on action research. So something that is on the field, not necessarily just theoretical. And what we are doing is really trying to look into raising awareness in within teacher education, especially for staff, But also we are looking into creating tools such as MOOCs to open up the space for conversations also for a much wider public, such as educators. So for raising awareness, we have set up a working group in the School of Education where we applied for small grants, and we set up a series of workshops. These workshops, we reached out for several different experts. We looked into our own learning innovation support unit at the University of Glasgow, where we invited experts to talk to us about what type of staff literacies we should develop when it comes to generative AI. What about the students, how the two of them relate, and what are really the skills that we should look into when we want to support this development. We then invited the Quality Assurance Agency in Scotland, because this is really related to higher education, assessment, quality, but also integrity. So the Quality Assurance Agency provided us with several guidance and especially with a lot of links on their website to try to support us for our own understanding in higher education, how we could support our student teachers to develop their understanding of generative AI. We then invited the Scottish Government, Education Scotland, because we thought it was really important for us to have their voice in our raising awareness. And we looked into policies that are more at UK level, but also into policies that are more ingrained into the Scottish Government, and most of all into applications of the generative AI in schools, because this is really what we want our teachers to reflect upon. And within this context, we also provided our members of staff with a lot of information on projects that different colleagues are undertaking when it comes to research. But then we, in our working group, we decided that was really important to try to put it all together and within a form of learning that could be free, that could be small size, but it could outreach not just our students, but educators in general. So we pointed towards MOOCs, and we provided a very short MOOC, 4 hours, where we looked into the basics of generative AI in education. We focused on very much bite sizes of learning, and we looked into the fundamentals of generative AI. We provided some examples on which to reflect, especially when it comes to how to use in master courses for master students, but also how to use it to develop your own understanding and maybe some good practice and good uses, guidelines. We looked at most of all into the ethical approach to generative AI, what is ethics, what is really plagiarism, trying to look into the philosophy of education more than just standard rules on what is considered ethical. And then we engaged in a lot of discussion and conversation. We would say that this MOOC is really a huge source of different opinions, and but just by looking at the forums that we provided, we have a very rich conversation going on there. The MOOC is divided in 4 modules, as you can see here. We worked quite a lot on understanding how generative AI works in general, especially large language models. What is prompt engineering, and why is it important? And in my opinion, from my research, I do believe that better input, better output, as we have been explained by several experts, is really, really important. So my focus will be principally on the prompt. So because to ask a good question, you really need to know what you're talking about. So I really believe that actually to promote critical thinking, you might want to focus a lot on the input, so the prompting, more than the output. We looked at different other aspects, especially practical aspects, and we did provide some scenarios, such as if you are a teacher and you produce your lesson planning with generative AI, what could happen? What do you need to look at? We provided those scenarios, and we waited for people to give us their opinions through the forums. So we opened up that kind of conversation. But we did this in within the attributes for the students that the University of Glasgow is really aiming to develop. And in particular, we looked into the critical thinker and independent thinkers. And we tried to provide examples on how generative AI could maybe support the critical thinking. This is only one example of a critical thinking framework, the Paul and Elder critical thinking. But this is not the only one. This is just to give you an example of what we were looking at. What are the different aspects of critical thinking? And the generative AI might not do it all for you, but certainly can support some of the aspects. And it's really important to point out here that especially in the MOOC, we put some stress, we put some emphasis on the human-machine interaction, on the human-machine feedback that could provide that conversation between the two that then can support the critical thinking. But we didn't do all around this is all good, generative AI is all good. We really pointed out also a lot of different aspects when it comes to opacity, for example, inexplicability, data privacy, security, and so on. If you just think about the fact that even just by copying and pasting a piece of an article in generative AI, you really have to think around copyrights. Am I really the owner of that piece of work? Can I really upload it as it is on the generative AI? How do I have to look into it? And if you look into a lot of the terms and conditions of all these generative AI tools, they leave the responsibility to the users. They leave the fact that you are responsible for what you upload into the generative AI tool. So this is something that users really need to think about because they might not know these particular aspects. We then concluded our MOOC with the permission of the authors with a series of research-based questions that we asked our audience to reflect. And most of the answers are in several of our forums. And this was done in collaboration with the authors of the papers. Just to give also the role modeling, because we wanted to make sure that people understand that you do not necessarily because you find something online, you own that material. That material is owned by the person that has produced it. So you really have to think about how are you going to use it when you put into the generative AI tool. This is all I wanted to share with you today.
Now we move on to our last speakers for Europe from the University of Glasgow, Mr. Dustin Husseini. So Dustin, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, thanks for having me here today. I'm going to kind of follow on from what Lavinia and Gabriela had said, so I'll just jump straight to it. So areas for consideration, I think, two key questions: expertise, who has expertise re generative AI, and also ethical considerations. First one, I think, is we're all learning, just not at the same pace. And that expertise will arise from not only your learners, but all kinds of staff. So if you're working in a school or a university, you have a lot of people who might be experimenting, but whose practices may go hidden or unknown because they don't have a certain type of contract or they're not teaching. This could be researchers, PGR students, undergraduates. This could also even be professional services staff who aren't necessarily student-facing, but whose experimentation will be just as important as academic staff. Also, this expertise will be localized to subjects, so breaking down these subject barriers is paramount. If you're teaching future teachers of, languages, but also mathematics, it's important that they draw upon each other's knowledge in respect to what is happening in generative AI, because it might be useful. We shouldn't keep to our silo barriers because that won't be very helpful for learning the various possibilities that generative AI allows us. Also, no one person will be the expert, so be aware of such claims. There's a lot of claims right now I see going around where we'd like someone to come speak about generative AI in the workplace and employability. And then you get these older professors saying, I can do that, but they haven't actually experimented with AI. They just have professor in front of their name or doctor. But there's a lot of other people who probably could do that, but because of traditional hierarchies, they can't. So be aware of who is an expert. Now, some resources. Let me just go back to the previous slide. I'll show you the resources in just a minute. One thing I think teacher education and teachers should talk about more generally is representations that human input into generative AI creates regarding ethnicity and nationality, gender, race, racialized gender. I think these things are not talked about enough because, well, who created AI? People from the white Anglophone West, which the algorithms are drawing upon a certain knowledge base, which unfortunately creates racist, stereotypical, and racially gendered images or representations of humans, whether these are imagery or actual text. One book, which I will show in a moment, that you should probably go away and read is called Race After Technology by Benjamin Ruha. This talks about how the algorithms are programmed by humans to then create effectively racist, stereotypical, xenophobic imagery. Once humans have put these, prompts in, it spits out something that is not entirely correct or is just totally incorrect and inappropriate. But I'll share that book in just a second. The other things that, well, in relation to this are two kind of resources. One is a presentation, one's a workshop. Last year, this time, I was experimenting with generative AI, just trying to understand what it could do as far as human representation, because I can see in schools, maybe in universities, people using generative AI to create images of anything, but especially of people. What is my knowledge base for this? 20 years ago, there was a program called Photoshop, and students would make all these wonderful posters with Photoshop, which would either be highly inappropriate or highly professional. The same thing will happen with generative AI, and we already see it happening with deepfake technology. But this resource, which I'll copy and paste into the chat, it won an award recently from the Association for Learning Development and Higher Education. A colleague and I work together on creating this. And it's all about getting students to develop their critical thinking abilities while understanding the possibilities, but also limitations of generative AI. And the last thing, of course, I think is not being talked about enough is the environmental applications. We often see in emails, please consider the environment before printing this email, but maybe we should also start talking about, do you really need to search this topic on generative AI? Because as you know, or if you don't know, generative AI tools consume vast amounts of water and energy, which take away resources from local communities where these places are actually based. I'll just put these in the chat so you'll have them.
Perfect. We got the first link. I see the second one is loading.
Is that an image? That looks like it's up. Yeah, there we go. There's the actual.
I think yeah, it's taking some time.
Okay. And then there's the other one. And the name of the book is, and again, this has implications for everyone, especially people who are non-white. So it is Anglophone countries that have created these things, and it is everyone else who can benefit, but also who will be on the negative receiving end of these things, of the representations that are incorrect.
Thank you so much, Dustin, for such insightful points and also for highlighting the environmental implications. I have a very specific questions on that. But before that, I have seen that there are some active conversations going on in the chat box. Thank you, David. Thank you, Lavinia, and also Gabriela, for Nahid as well. So I think those of you who are not paying attention to the chat box, you can quickly read it. But may I request Lavinia and Gabriela, like you have already responded, would you like to summarize the question and your response very briefly? First Lavinia and then Gabriela.
Yeah, sure. So one question was about the research culture and how we support students to use generative AI for literature review. And at the moment, there are a couple of ongoing projects that are trying to look into how Doctoral researchers, for instance, could be supported to integrate generative AI tools in their work. I've also had various conversations at our university with our own doctoral researchers, and they are using multiple platforms, not ChatGPT. I think a lot of people, and both on the research side, researchers as well as early career researchers are exploring various tools. And some of the tools are becoming more refined than others. Again, I think it's we need to start differentiating and looking closely at what these specific technologies are doing. Dustin, I agree with the point that you were making earlier about the production of images. I was looking for, at some point, for a platform that would create images, and I didn't want to pay for an account. And I came across a page which actually was producing all images were non-white, non-Western. So it was the flip side. So the platforms are multiplying. And again, the question is, how do you engage with them from a reflective standpoint? I think we're, as Dustin and Gabriela was saying, we are in the space where the conversation hasn't settled, and it won't. And we have important roles in trying to identify how we want the terms of the conversation to be set.
Thank you, Lavinia. Gabriela?
Yeah, from my side, the question I received was mainly about the feedback from the MOOC, if there has been any change into the attitudes of people that took the MOOC. Now, I don't particularly think there is a change of attitude, but certainly there is a much more raising questions and started to question even their own use or their own approach to the generative AI. One of the feedback that we received, this was an email that arrived to me. We received that the feedback was about how the MOOC was structured. So it seems like people do not necessarily want anymore just a series of links and resources where they can go and check by themselves what to do, but they would like to have a bit more understanding of how can we use this, how can we discuss this, although there is another side of the coin, because some of the feedback we received on the MOOC, which I cannot share just now, but I can share the sense of it, is that people would like to have a bit more, this is how you use it, this is Gemini, this is how you use it, this is ChatGPT, and that is not necessarily what we would like to do, because we don't want to give a prescriptive use of these tools, but we really would like to use the tool as that way to think outside the box, but not become the box itself. So some of the negative feedback were about they were expecting a bit more guidelines and instructions on how to use it, while most of the positive feedback were about we really enjoyed the fact that we had to do it, we had to experiment different tools, and then we had the opportunity to come back and talk about it. And see the forums, for example, they are in multilingual, so there are some of the feedback in the forums on the MOOC is in Russian, some are in Greek, some are in Italian, and it's really interesting to go and look at the different perspective there. So yeah.
Thank you, Gabriela. I will kick off with a question to Justin. It's very interesting that you mentioned about environmental impact, because I think it's absolutely crucial when it comes to AI and education. And thank you so much for sharing all the resources as well. Just a little bit of background. So we have another project that is part of the ASEFClassNet as well. Actually, that's the flagship project for this specific project at ASEF. It's called the School Collaboration. So basically, this year we brought together over 200 participants from across Asia and Europe, and they are working on something called innovative teaching practice. We haven't had all the submissions yet for this year. They are submitting now, but last year we had a project where some participants, they addressed education for sustainable development with the use of AI. So of course, when it comes to the ethical implications of using AI, they were trying to address these questions about, you are using AI to innovate your teaching practices. However, there is this, and at the same time, you are using AI to advocate for something called education for sustainable development. So how do you really kind of, find the balance when it comes to environmental impact of using AI versus raising awareness for ESD, right? So what would be your thought or what would be your advice for this specific group of participants who are trying to find the balance between ESD and the use of AI for their teaching practice.
I think going back to the tagline at the end of emails still applies. If you don't need to search it, don't do it. If you don't need to print this email, don't print it. But I realize that's not going to be easy. So unfortunately, reading about these kind of things, I mean, there's a quote from that article, generative AI data centers generally, they need enormous amounts of fresh water to cool the server farms effectively. So getting people to understand this would be one step in the right direction. But this probably doesn't have a simple answer other than you need to be aware of the implications of what you're doing. So it goes back to Paulo Pereire's critical consciousness, if you want to really go into it, getting people to really understand that their actions have a direct impact on either, for example, the environment or one another. And so in this respect, using these kind of tools, for example, and you could even extend that to any cloud tool, right? So just an example, a lot of companies, Adobe, for example, Microsoft, they're pushing us to cloud subscriptions of software. But the implication of that is there's going to be an environmental cost. And if we are facing a global, climate crisis, and they're pushing us towards subscription models that benefit them while also harming the planet, okay, we have two problems or three problems. So do you see how this has actually multiplied? If we think about Adobe, Microsoft, Google, of course, is the big one. All of them require, well, they don't require, but most of them now require a cloud-based model of subscribing to their software. Gone are the days where you can just download the software and use it on your computer very easily, without needing to use the cloud base. So again, it goes back to ethics and environmental implications. Thinking about where are these tools living? Where do they host it? What energy do they need? And what is the implication of that on, like this local community? Apparently, they use 6% of the city district's water to train this, tool. That's just for training. What about usage? We don't know about the usage. How much is the usage actually doing or, consuming? So it's like an onion, many layers, peeling back all the layers of the onion, understanding how one affects the other. Right, Gabriella?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, I was nodding because if you don't mind if I can jump in just with a very
Yeah.
personal experience. Um, my daughter has global learning difficulties, so she has difficulties in expressing herself, learning. She's 15 years old and not reading or writing yet. And yet we are in holiday just now, and she is using ChatGPT 3.5, and she developed by herself a strategy where she uses her phone, Google Talk, to write a phrase, and then she copies down the letters in ChatGPT to ask the question, and she then asked ChatGPT to write a book with her on her favorite characters for a series TV that she's watching. And so what she does is she goes on the mobile, she goes like, I want to know about, and she says the name of the series. And then she copies down the whole phrase into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT replies. And I ask the chat to behave like one of the characters of the series. So she now is chatting with the character to try to write a story. And the story is coming up. I am gonna print it, and I translated the chat translated the story in two languages so far, and the two dialects, Glaswegian and Napolitan, which are our own dialects as well. So it is really funny and powerful the way she's doing, because she's using these new skills that she developed in a matter of a week by using the chat. So yes, absolutely, is right. We need to use it in the most appropriate way, but the potential is incredible.
But then this goes to the question of equity, right? You know, the fence. Okay,
Mhm.
so she would be like the smaller person effectively on that picture. So she would need to use that, right? But someone over here who's already privileged, they can speak, they can write. For them, it's like an extra way of making their work more efficient. They don't need it. So I guess, but that's what I would think about is we need to think about equity. Of course, someone like her, yes, 100% need it. But someone who already has like 3 doctorates, no, you don't need it. It's silly, but that's the way it is. You know, if you're already privileged, do you really need access to these things?
Thank you so much, Gabriella, for sharing your own personal experience. I think it's quite empowering to hear and learn from experience. And it's also nice to see that you were already involved in the prompt engineering, building modules for prompt engineering. And also, I think your personal experience in a way is also shaping how you were working or the issues that you want to address, right? I wanted to ask 2 questions because I don't see that anyone raised hand from the participant. So the first question is about, you mentioned about, having a space for sharing when it comes to AI in education and learning from experiences. What would be your advice to improve this platform that we call the ASEFClassNet17 Faculty Collaboration Cross-Faculty Dialogue Phase for the next edition? Because that was our goal, to bring people together, talk and learn from each other to dialogues. So what has your experience been so far? And then how do you, if you have any advice so far for us to kind of, improve this as well?
Did you direct the question to one of us or?
You, especially, I think you were the one who mentioned about experiences, learning from experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my again experience, I used it as a student as well. So I think Dustin is right. You don't really need to use it all the time. And quite often I got quite frustrated with some of these tools, especially the Chat GPT, but I also use the Scopus AI, I use the Azure AI, and the superficiality of the answers was quite daunting. But until I started to ask myself, is it my questions that are not specific enough, or is the actual chat or the functionality of these large language models that is not powerful enough? So because I don't have an answer to those 2 questions, but I can control one of them, which is myself. Then I started to read a bit more. I started to study more. I started to expand the way I was gaining knowledge through conversation chats with people, like not just with books or articles. And I started to formulate better questions without necessarily trying it straight away, but starting to question myself first if those questions would lead to an answer that I really needed the chat for, or I could answer first myself and then build up a better question later. So basically, I was doing the process of a systematic review until you get to the point that you do not have any more answers to your questions because you need to do that, apply the research to do it. So I think that my suggestion for people that want to use it is to improve, is not necessarily improving the platforms because they might be already doing everything they should be doing, but improve the way you approach them. You don't need to approach them with a total blank slate. You actually really need to know what you're looking for. Even in the brainstorming stage, that quite a lot we use the chat for, or the generative AI for. You don't go with a total, unknown on. You really need to approach it with some good knowledge to make it effective. Otherwise, it's just, it's just a way to do our job, as Dustin was saying, faster, but not necessarily better.
Yeah,
Thank
and as you said, Gabriella, it's better to, if you're going to use something like this, first make a mind map of what you want to ask it, right? Just like starting an essay, first make a mind map and then start to maybe use it. Because if you just ask it random questions, the data is limited anyway, and it will give you data that may not be correct. If you ask about decolonizing education, for example, a colleague of mine who passed away earlier this year, he had been experimenting over the last 8 months, and he kept asking the similar question. First time it was totally wrong. Second time it was a little bit better. Second time it was a little bit better. So it kept improving. But the point is, if you ask it a question today, a year from now, it may have a completely different answer. And I see Guang Chen has asked a question about paid AI tools. To my knowledge, no university in the UK pays for these unless the student receives disability student allowance, which is for people who have ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, any kind of thing that they can register with. And in this case, they might pay for Grammarly. And I know this because I'm a PhD student and I receive it because somehow they think that because I have ADHD, Grammarly will help me, which is kind of an interesting connection. But this is one AI tool that is paid for. But there probably will be more, I suspect, as a result.
And just to add, Jyoti, really quickly to the conversation on what's next, I think we need more in-depth exploration of how we can use these tools, because we oftentimes talk about, we're putting in questions, but the power comes from developing prompts. And we talked a lot about AI literacies and what those means. And I think that there is a little bit, even in presentations, there is a little bit of a discussion at the surface level of how far you go with these prompts. And we have the knowledge base to develop practices and to support people develop practices that get more deeply into what these tools can help with. We were talking earlier about demonstrations, and it is true, if you go to tech fairs, the people who are doing the demonstrations are the people who are selling the product. And if we leave it for the teachers to get their knowledge from there, then we're missing the boat and we're not doing our duty, which is to actually explore, interrogate, and push, back against some of these practices. There's a powerful argument in teachers saying, we are overworked. We need quick solutions. And as much as we hate that, and we want, that sort of productive, critical space for teachers, the reality is always hitting us back. So it's about trying to support teachers to do more with these tools, which they will turn to anyways, in the same way our students do. You say, no, don't use it, they will.
And actually, on that note, one thing that is important is I've noticed, I used to work in an IT department. The mantra in that IT department was the individual must upskill themselves.
Yes.
I'm sorry, this is totally wrong. This is ridiculous. Please do not listen to these kind of people. Please challenge these people, because the only way you learn well is in a community, especially when you're learning something difficult, right? If you go to a woodworking workshop, they never give you a tool, a dangerous tool especially, immediately. They teach you about the tools first. So if you teach in a school, university, make sure there is a course that you can attend, not just something where you have to learn by yourself. Not to say that the MOOC is a bad idea, Gabriella, but I think there's something to say about like learning together in like workshops where we practice together, experiment together, rather than separately.
Don't get me wrong, the MOOC itself is based a lot on forums, and that is where they learned from each other. And I think it's not necessarily about challenging the individuals, it's challenging the ideas, challenging the mentality. And that is what we are doing here as well, because we are gonna work in groups to produce ideas and projects. And that is where we want to take the step forward. Jyoti, I think that we took over the conversation completely, so we might just give the microphone back to you.
No worries, but very good conversation and really grateful that you were bringing up all of these critical issues. I already had a few questions for Lavinia, but you already addressed in your last comment, and I still have a few more. And looking at the time, we need to move on to Asia, but I will post them in the chat box, or if we have time later, and we can get back to that. But thank you so much to the three of you for raising all these critical issues, as well as also for such interactive and critical response to all the questions. Now we move to Asia, but before that, quick disclaimer, we might run over our sessions today, maybe by 5 or 10 minutes. So we will really appreciate if you could stay a bit longer, and we are also kind and expecting your understanding. But if you need to leave early, we totally understand. In that case, feel free to do so. So now it's our pleasure to invite Dr. Selena Nemorin from Monash University, Australia, to present her presentations on the 2 point. You have 15 minutes, Selena. Thank you.
So thank you very much for attending my presentation. My name is Selena Nemorin, and I'm a lecturer in educational technology in the Faculty of Education at Monash University in Australia. But before I actually proceed with my presentation, I wanted to do an acknowledgement of country and say that Monash University recognises that its Australian campuses are located on the unceded lands of the people of the Kulin Nations and pays its respects to their elders past and present. So just a little bit about Monash University for those of you who don't know who we are. We were established in 1958 and primarily as a research-focused institution with leanings towards science and technology. But over the years, we've expanded across disciplines, and we've expanded to 9 campuses across 6 countries. So we have campuses in Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, China, and India. We have over 100 partner universities with just under 85,000 students and just over 18,000 staff. And in the Faculty of Education, we have some interesting pathways for people to actually get into educational studies. The first one is initial teacher education, where we're training students to become teaching professionals. We have the Master of Education, where students can specialise in general education studies, digital learning, early childhood education, inclusive and special education, and Master of Teaching. So in the Master of Teaching, students can specialise in early childhood, primary or secondary education, or a combination of those things. So as I said, I'm in the Faculty of Education, and I teach across the initial teacher education space and the Master of Education. So just to deal with the first question that we're being asked to present on, how does your institution approach learning about AI and learning with AI? So first of all, there are 2 different aspects of integration that happens at Monash University. There's the curriculum integration and faculty integration. So with curriculum integration, we're looking at learning with and about AI as a student-facing activity, where we integrate these issues into the curriculum itself. So when ChatGPT, for example, boomed in 2022, there are a lot of public schools, or actually states banned public schools from using generative AI in the classroom, and higher education institutions were actually, resisting using generative AI in the classroom. But Monash University was at the forefront of that and arguing that generative AI is a part of society and it's going to be a big part of society. So we should actually see how to incorporate this thing that we call generative AI into the higher education classroom. So they started developing policies with regards to how students might be able to use generative AI, for example, ChatGPT, when doing their assessments and when learning in the classroom. And there's also faculty integration, where we're doing workshops and professional development seminars for faculty who are interested in learning about AI and learning how to use AI, particularly in assessing students. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. What I wanted to highlight to you is the importance that Monash University places on learning about generative AI. So there was a Monash task force on generative artificial intelligence that was put together in 2022, I believe it was, 2022, 2023. And they looked at how important it was to include generative AI into the curriculum. And the argument, as I mentioned before, is because these technologies are becoming rapidly a part of life, it's also going to be rapidly a part of academic practice and career success. So a lot of students are going to be needing to know these skills to actually be able to generate content in their profession. So it's important that higher education plays a role in developing skills in students to be able to critically think and reflect around the evaluative potential of their evaluative skills, beg your pardon, for looking at whether or not AI-generated material is trustworthy, honest, reliable. And the other aspect of this is developing their students' comfort and confidence in using and applying AI in collaborative productions of assessment. So there are two aspects of this, learning with AI and learning about AI, both of which the Education Work Group released information on in their report in 2023. So again, about learning with AI and learning about AI, our technology units actually encourage students to explore how AI can be used to contribute to teaching and learning. So we actually have digital technology units that are compulsory for our initial teacher educators, and for our master's students, we have digital technology courses that they can pick as an elective. And in these courses, they're taught about different features of AI. They're taught about how AI is deployed into society. They're taught about the ethical implications of AI, including the environmental implications, which were discussed before. We give them opportunities to develop knowledge and skills relevant to the selection of particular AI systems into teaching and learning. And as I mentioned just recently, they are made aware of contemporary issues and debates surrounding AI technology, such as equity of access and ethics. So all of these things are actually incorporated into our units in the digital technologies area. But what Monash University is actually trying to do at the moment is encourage all faculty members to somehow incorporate AI teachings into all of their units so that it's a cross-disciplinary approach to education with AI. So one example of learning with AI is an example from a course that is a first year and second year course on digital technologies. And what the students were asked to do was to generate an essay using ChatGPT. And what they had to do then was to look at the quality of the output and look at relevance, authenticity, bias, cohesion, and consistency, and then determine whether that output was actually useful. And if it wasn't useful, then they had to reimagine or rework the output so that it would actually be submitted as an academic essay. So modeling these appraisal processes developed their cognitive abilities to evaluate AI-generated output and promoted AI literacy, in as much as it was able to allow them to determine whether or not the output given by ChatGPT was actually accurate. And we all know that ChatGPT hallucinates. So it gave them the opportunity to really see from practical perspective what ChatGPT was actually generating. The other thing that they learned with regards to AI literacy was how to develop good prompts. So prompt engineering was one of the aspects to this activity that they were actually assessed on. So they were assessed on whether or not their prompts generated decent introductory paragraphs and decent bodies and conclusions for their essays, which they then, as I mentioned before, went back and reworked to perfect it or hone their skills. So the faculty is also offered a range of professional development, as I mentioned before. We have an AI bootcamp that lasts for a day. And with this AI bootcamp, it's more or less people who are interested in incorporating AI into their classrooms. And it mostly looks at how AI can be used for assessment and how we can actually generate AI acknowledgements for our students to use, because we know they're using it. They admit they're using it, but we just want to know how they're using it. So the AI Bootcamp has been really helpful in actually giving the faculty insights into how AI systems are being developed and how they can be used in the classroom. There are other professional development sessions that are available, but at the moment, nothing is mandatory. It's all voluntary. So I think that these professional development sessions will become mandatory at some point, but we've got things like introduction of AI into education, which just gives you the basics, test driving AI for teaching and learning, and approaches to adopting AI in education. And as I said before, Monash University was one of the first universities to actively encourage using AI in education. And this is, I guess, the fruits of its labor of the time. There are some current projects as well at the moment with regards to AI in education. There's In Search of Decolonial Ethics of AI in Education. So this one looks at the foundations of ethics of AI in education and asks what it means to actually have an ethics of AI that has been decolonized. There's another funded project called an assessment framework, assessments for writing with generative artificial intelligence. And they're supporting teachers and teaching in the age of artificial intelligence. And this one actually does a scoping study of what kinds of AI systems are in place in high schools and what teachers actually know about artificial intelligence and how comfortable they are with teaching it and how they're actually using it in the schools. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that Monash University encourages us to do projects with AI in education. So with regards to which aspects of AI we consider most crucial, or I consider most crucial to address in teacher education at the moment, I think AI literacy, as everybody else in their presentations has spoken about, is the most important. But I think for me, it's a list of questions that we have to ask ourselves, not just about being AI literate in terms of being able to understand misinformation and disinformation or understanding how to use AI tools. But we want to ask ourselves questions such as, how do we use these AI tools effectively? And what criteria might we use when selecting them for teaching and learning? So how do we use these tools for teaching and learning? What are the best tools to use for whatever pedagogical purposes we have in mind? How do we evaluate students when it comes to using AI in assessment tasks? This is a big one. And it's actually a hot topic at Monash University because we're struggling to make sense of how to evaluate essays when we know that these essays have been written with the aid of generative AI. So how do you test for critical thinking in the student if part of the essay has been written by a computer? Where does that, where does that line get drawn? Another question is, what happens to critical and creative thinking when relying on these new technologies? So we know that our students are using these technologies and perhaps over-relying on these technologies, but faculty are also using these technologies. So what happens when you're over-relying on using generative AI? What happens to your critical thinking? What happens to your creative thinking? Does it go by the wayside? Is it like using a calculator when we're so used to using calculators now that we don't need to remember how to do multiplying, large numbers? Are we going to forget how to think critically and creatively? The other question is, how do we trust the information that's being generated by AI? This is a common question that everybody has been asking themselves. We know that AI hallucinates. We know that AI is biased. We know that there are stereotypes that are being generated by ChatGPT, for example. So how do we trust that information? And if we can't trust it, what can we do to mitigate that information or the bias in that information? How do we make sure that these systems are actually being trained on data that isn't biased? Is that even possible? Other questions revolved around, what are the racialized and gendered social imaginaries being outputted by AI systems? So in the Masters of Teaching, I teach a course on key issues and debates in education on technology. And one of the questions is, how do we come to terms with the racialized and gendered outputs that ChatGPT will actually spit out. And that speaks to what the individual, I think it was Dustin, was speaking about before in terms of racialized and gendered and biased information that is being put out by AI systems. So what do we do about that? How do we approach the ethical discussions in relation to AI development and deployment? And when I say ethical discussions, I'm talking about what are the social implications of generative AI? What are the environmental implications? But there are also implications such as the shadow labor that's being used to generate or to actually train these models, or the people in the global south who are actually paid peanuts to tag pictures, for example. How do we come to terms with this kind of labor being used for a system that we're using every day? Isn't that equivalent to a modern form of slavery, if you want to actually look at it that way? And the last question is, what are the surveillance risks of embedding AI into education? So data is being scraped at an enormous rate. People are being watched. So what are the risks of putting AI into education with regards to proctoring systems, with regards to students being watched on their computers? Are there any ethical implications for surveillance and AI, or is it actually a safe space for students to be in? So this is all I wanted to talk about today. I hope I covered a little bit about Monash University and our initiatives on AI and what we actually do at the moment at the university with regards to AI, learning with AI and learning about AI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selena. A lot of critical questions that you have already listed that we are actually currently exploring, as well as we empower our teachers who are currently teaching at the secondary and vocational schools, since they are at this stage of designing innovative teaching practice on AI and education. So I think looking at the list of questions you have, my question would be related to maybe seeking advice. How do you think we can approach this kind of issues and raise awareness among our teachers when we evaluate what they have designed? Do you have any advice?
When we evaluate what?
So our school collaboration participants are designing something called innovative teaching practice with focus on learning about AI and learning with AI. So the goal is to improve their teaching practices, however, with a critical view on the role of AI in education. So some of them are focusing on, for example, the aspect on learning about AI, some of them learning with AI. For example, if they are using a tool in their teaching practice that they are designing, then they are also addressing what are the ethical concerns, right? One challenge that they are facing is, of course, as Lavinia also mentioned in her presentation, there is not, currently we don't have a lot of resources when it comes to, let's say, how to cite AI tools, or enough guidelines when it comes to using AI tools. I think what I'm really trying to understand from you is how could we support them better in this specific design phase?
Oh my goodness. So this is a tricky question, isn't it? I think part of my answer revolves around a community of practice. I think what we have to do is get people together and discuss the different kinds of things that they're implementing, that they're designing, and discuss the obstacles that they're facing. And I think that's the only way that we're going to come to a decision or some kind of outcome, because it's so new with regards to AI systems and deployment and development. All this information is new to us. Professional development for sure, with leading experts would definitely help. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question in a way that you want me to answer the question, but I think that a community of practice and forums where people can discuss their challenges would actually highlight different difficulties that people are facing. And then from then you can actually target discussions and come to conclusions based on what people are saying to each other. I think that's the only way to do it. Otherwise, we can turn to UNESCO guidance, we can turn to universities that have created different guidances, For example, Australia has put out a generative AI framework that allows teachers to make sense of how to use and deploy AI systems into education. So your participants can look at things like that and how that works in the classroom, and they can find use cases with teachers who have actually used these things in the classroom and learn from those approaches as well. I think, is there a link to this framework? Someone's asking me for a link to this framework. Yes, there is a link. I'll put it in the chat in a second. So yeah, local discussions with your teachers, community of practice, but also guided by para-government documents. And there are lots of documents out there that can actually help them. But looking at different countries and different kinds of frameworks that are being released by these countries. So I'll put the link for the generative AI framework because it is a useful framework that came out last year. And it does help teachers in terms of trying to figure out the best ways to approach AI in education and how to teach their students about AI in education. So yes, community of practice would be my answer.
Thank you so much. I think Lavinia has a question for you. Earlier, I think Lavinia was trying to raise it. Lavinia, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, I was primarily interested, Selena, in the makeup of the team behind some of the resources that you mentioned and the courses that you're doing. And I can see that Nahid said that it's primarily an interdisciplinary team, but that's also something that I'm interested in is who informs these courses and who provides feedback. Are you working with people in computer science, on people across various disciplinary backgrounds, or is your team primarily based in education?
So we've got the professional development. So there are two aspects to this. In the Faculty of Education, the digital technologies courses or units, beg your pardon, are designed by educators such as myself. So what we do is we go to professional development sessions, we scrape as much information as we can, we come back and we put it into our units and we teach our students that way, or we do our own research and we integrate our own research into our units. The example that I gave you about the essay that the students wrote, that was actually part of one of our digital technology units, and that was also a research study. So in a way, for those digital technology units in the Faculty of Education, we're collaborating with each other in education, but we're being advised by people across the board. With regards to the professional development, there are interdisciplinary groups who are responsible for designing and developing those workshops and the boot camps, computer science, infotech, architects, medicine. It's all kinds of different groups are responsible for actually generating the information that goes into those professional development sessions. So not just the Faculty of Education, but we do have a presence as a Faculty of Education in those professional development units as people who help design them. There's an AI learning circle. That's an interdisciplinary group from across the university, from all different faculties, who actually come together and discuss issues that we are facing with regards to AI. And then they release information on a website. We have a website dedicated to it where we find all of our information on. And there's also Teach HQ with an interdisciplinary focus on that, that releases information on AI. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay.
I see that Dustin raised his hand. Please go ahead, Dustin.
I was just curious about what you just said. How did you find that circle, so to speak? Because as I reflect, last year, I noticed that certain people took the opportunity to claim generative AI for themselves. And I suspect this has happened across different universities, which effectively marginalized others. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. There was a call for people who were interested, and people were tapped to join this AI learning circle. And there are representatives from each faculty on it. But I imagine that if I wanted to join, I'd probably be able to join if I wanted to, but I don't have the time to do it. But I don't think people are being marginalized, not in this space. Is that where you're where you're going with your
Kind of. No, no,
question?
no. I just noticed that some people are using generative AI as their kind of badge to be like, I've done this.
Okay.
Their claim to kind of they
To
need it toward
fame.
their claim to fame.
Okay.
For example, I'm in education because I'm passionate about it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I got into decolonization, but also generative AI. But I remember a colleague distinctly pulling me up, a senior colleague, saying, Your name is known for these too. And I was like, well, shouldn't it be we're all interested in these things because they are affecting us all and they will affect us all. Um, Goes back to my comment earlier about how there are no experts, although some people want to claim to be experts just to get that badge effectively.
I would say there are a few people like that, but I haven't come across them in the workshops themselves. I've come across them in other faculty organized or cross-faculty organized initiatives where and that tends to be beg your pardon to everybody if I'm saying this, but it tends to be white middle-aged men who come along and claim that generative AI expert badge. And I have felt at times not heard by these people when I voiced my opinions. So I take your point. I understand where you're coming from, and I do know that there are individuals who are like that. But I wouldn't say that the AI Learning Circle or the workshop, the people who spearhead these workshops are actually in that bag at all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Selena. And if any of you have questions for Selena, please feel free to type in the chat box. And also, if you have any questions for the University of Glasgow team, you can do that as well. They are doing a brilliant job responding very quickly. Now, let's move on to another Asian country, China. Let's invite our next speakers, Dr. Guang Chen from Beijing Normal University. Okay, you have already shared. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good evening, I think. I'm Guang Chen. I'm an associate professor at School of Educational Technology, Faculty of Education, Beijing Normal University. I will keep my presentation as short as possible to save some time. So for the BNU, BNU was founded in 1902. And it was a department of education of Imperial University of Peking. So we share same predecessors with Peking University, and the BNU is also the first university of China, China's history with the main mission of teachers training. To address the two questions, for the first one, what's our university's approach learning about and with AI? I think things are a little bit different here in China because all the major internet services were blocked in China. For example, Google and Facebook and ChatGPT as well, OpenAI. So we have some substitution services in Chinese, but I think they are not good enough. So other than that, if we want to use the AI, the generative AI, like the ChatGPT or Google Gemini, we have to use the VPN, and it is not allowed, literally not allowed here. So from my point of view, we don't have a university-wide policy about AI, but our university does have some I think approaches like the workshops and seminars. We are at I think we are at the very early stage of to embrace the AI. So, for example, we have the seminars and forums from time to time. Last month, I noticed there's a generative AI plus education potentials and challenge seminar, and there are keynote speeches from all over the world. There are also group discussions and hands-on workshops. We don't have, I think we don't have any student-oriented AI workshops. All those workshops or seminars are for the teachers, and it's not mandatory. It's free for all. I think that's the kind of situation of the BNU right now. But for a lot of my colleagues, for the researchers and teachers, we do have a lot of AI related research projects going on. For example, I'm in charge of several of them. One of them was founded by the Ministry of Science and Technology. So as we talk about the research projects, a lot of my colleagues are working on all kinds of AI related research projects right now. One of my projects was from the Ministry of Science and Technology. It's not from the Ministry of Education. As you can see here, the Ministry of Education they will always wait and see what happens, and they will carefully design their moves. So what we do right now, we use a large language model to analyze student engagement automatically. So we use the video recordings and from all levels, from K-12 to higher education, and we propose from the literature and with the Delphi method, we propose the engagement analysis framework. And with that framework, we can ask the large model to analyze the students' behavior, including their behavior, their facial emotion, their language, and at this time, we have an accuracy rate over 80%. I think that's a very good start. But the research, this result is it's at the whole level. We analyze the classroom behavior at the whole level, not at the individual level. In the future, we'll keep focus, keep digging, try to find the individual one's engagement, and we will evaluate them and give them some scores. That's the evaluation with AI. Let's skip it. This is the research procedures, but I think we don't have that much time, so we can skip the technology part. We use the video input and split them to audio and image, and we use the mini GPT-4 to analyze and describe the image to text, and we also transform audio to text. And with the help of the Llama 2, it's an open source large model. We can do the semantic segmentation, and with the help of decision tree, we can finally ask the large model to automatically analyze and code the classroom video and to do the engagement classification. And to address the second one, I think I have a trapezoid teacher's training model. since I have involved in a lot of teachers training session, every time when there's a new technology, there will be teachers training or teachers education. So I always use this framework or model to design my teachers training course. There are 4 stages, in my opinion. The lowest one is we should let the teachers know what is this technology. For example, I have been to like the mobile devices. For example, your mobile phone or tablet, and other stuff like the AR or VR. What is this technology? Now it's AI. We should let the teachers know what is the technology. And the second stage is how to use this technology in your daily life. For example, when we talk about the mobile devices, how do you use your mobile device? That's like 15 years ago. Not a lot of people have mobile phones, smart mobile phones. And after that, we'll move to this third stage, how to learn or how to teach with the technology. Now it's how to learn with AI. And the last stage is how to design your own technology-based courses, like the AI courses. As you can see here, the higher the stage is, the fewer teachers can be there. So, in my opinion, we can conclude the stage 1 and the stage 2 as learn about AI, and the stage 3 and stage 4 is learn with AI. In my opinion, what's the most important part of this one? And I agree with Dr. Huang Jiang, Dongxiang Wang. I remember he said all the technology is it's tools. We should always focus on the human. I strongly agree with him, and I think because I have seen a lot of technologies come and they go, like all kind of stuff. They just but there's always people, human, remains there. So I think we should always focus on the students, on ourselves. That's my shares for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for highlighting specifically the on AI literacy and different types of model for teacher education. I'm actually very curious about so in the diagram that you have shared, you mentioned about how to use AI under learning about AI. How do you approach it? Because so far, some of the resources that I came across often when it comes to using AI or learning how to use AI, they are addressing under learning with AI, not about AI. And I
Yeah.
think we also kind of took the same approach when we are currently we are working on designing our on-site program. So anything that has to do with using AI, we are working it under learning with AI. What's your view on that? And where do you think should be the distinction? And in your graph, in your image, specifically, where do you address issues like ethical challenges when it comes to using AI in education?
In my opinion, as for here in China, most of teachers, they don't have ideas about AI because they don't have a ways to assess the AI. So we should start with the very basic level, very basic stage 1. So that's we call it the AI boot camp. And after that, we will for example, we will have some workshops to teach them, and we will provide some AI related services because not all the teachers have VPNs. We have to teach them how to use them. We can also have to try some, the substitution services here in China, but it's a bit different since the Chinese one's not good as let's say the ChatGPT 4.0. So I kind of lost about your question. I'm sorry.
No worries. I think I will type the question in the chat box. Looking at the
Okay,
time,
sure.
we need to move on for the next
Okay.
presentation. So sorry about the time, but I do have also questions related to your slide on different types of research project at BNU. We are also working with actually BNU for next year's project. So you might know
Okay.
Dr. Tingwen and Dr. Ronghui
Oh
once.
yeah, Tingwen, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's very interesting to see how how technically advanced in terms of using AI in classrooms when it comes to schools or institutions in China. So I think we can have a whole new discussion on that. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and also for sharing the institutional status of Beijing Normal University. Now we move on to another country in Asia. Our last speakers for today from Asia, Dr. Hyusun An from Wonju Office of Education in South Korea. Hyusun, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm participant from Europe and Asia. It's very honor to me be part of this ASEP faculty project. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Hyosun An. I'm a supervisor working at Wonju Office of Education. And as a supervisor at the Office of Education, I implement the policies of Jeonbuk State of Education and support schools in our area and design and operate educational programs for local teachers and the students. Actually, I have a wide range of responsibility at the office. That means that I'm not an expert in the field of artificial intelligence. So through the project, I aim to learn a lot from you, experts, how to effectively incorporate artificial intelligence and digital education into school curriculum and how to design good programs for the teachers. Let me start from introduction of my institution. So Wonju Office of Education is one of the 14 support offices under Jeonbuk State Office of Education. So as you see on the map, Jeonbuk Province is located in the southwestern part of South Korea, and it consists of 14 cities and counties, and Wonju is one of them. So in our area, we have 33 preschools and 30 elementary schools and 30 middle schools, 8 high schools, and 1 special education schools. And here we have around 9,600 students and 1,000 teachers. Yeah, so let me move on to the first question. How does our institution approach learning about AI and learning with AI? Actually, our provincial office follows the Ministry of Education's directions for digital education innovation. In 2023, the Ministry of Education in South Korea announced the digital-based education innovation plan to achieve personalized education for all. The specific directions include, as you've seen in the slide, developing digital textbook using AI technology and data science, and conducting intensive training to cultivate competent teachers, and developing teaching and learning methods that utilize digital technology, and fourthly, operating leading schools for piloting, and lastly, expanding digital infrastructures. So all these aiming for a major transformation in education for the digital age. Yeah, here I'd like to share with you 2 key projects that showcases our government, our educational office's approach to AI education. The first project is building a future education environment. To start AI digital education in earnest, we are establishing classrooms and the learning environments. As you seen in the table, we have begun distributing large number of tablets and laptops from elementary to high schools. And also, we are installing the smart boards in all classrooms of elementary and middle schools in our region. And the second project I'd like to introduce to you is the development of AI digital textbook. This project is actually one of the current government key policy tasks and part of the 3 major education reform tasks. So the Korean government aims to achieve qualitative innovation in public education through AI digital textbooks, which include changing the role of teachers and teaching method and school cultures. As shown in the table, timeline, the design phases began in the 2023, followed by development and evaluation with the goal of implementing the textbook in schools by March 2025. We are planning to develop 5 subjects first: mathematics, English, computer science, and special education and the Korean language. And we are going to expand to other subjects later. And along with the textbooks and development of AI, we are also planning to develop of AI-based teaching and learning platform. So 11 local education offices actually collectively invested for the development. And the beta test is scheduled for the January to February 2025, and intensive training for the leading teachers in July to August. And service will start for students, teachers, and parents starting in August to September 2025. The Ministry of Education expects that this initiative to enhance personalized learning for students and for teachers, it helps design data-driven teaching and learning, and for the parents provide the systematic information for the of the students. However, as indicated in the timeline, the rapid implementation of these policies is increasing the workload and fatigue of teachers who need to adapt very quickly. So despite this, in any ways, teachers generally agree that adapting to these new trends is necessary, and because the new curriculum is very soon, and AI digital textbook will be implemented from 2025. Yeah. And so at this point, so I'd like to address this the second question. At this point, I think the most important aspect of teacher education is how to integrate artificial intelligence into the curriculum and conduct lessons in the classrooms. As I said before, the new curriculum is implemented very soon, and the teachers as designers of artificial enhanced lessons, artificial intelligence enhanced lessons, teachers must be expert in the, reorganizing curricular and the planning lesson content. And they also should be proficient users of AI tools. So therefore, I think practical training focused on classroom practice is really essential in our institutions. And however, once these lessons are applied in the field, I think teachers will inevitably face practical issues related to the ethics of AI use. And I think this is another area that requires prior presentation and thorough preparation. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Hyo-sun, for presenting a lot of ideas and what's going on in your institution in such a short amount of time. Really appreciate it. Let me see first if our participants have any questions for you. You can use the chat box, or also you can raise your hand, then I will invite you to speak up. Lavinia, yes, go ahead.
I had a quick question, just because I was very interested in this shift towards AI digital textbooks, which is quite a substantial, educational plan. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the knowledge base for the digital AI textbook. What is the knowledge that it will pull from? Or is this something at the very incipient stages at the moment, given the timeline and the thinking behind the project?
Actually, is that this project is a government-driven project. So, as a supervisor working in the regional offices, actually we don't join the process of development. But as far as I know, and as I educated from the government policies, it's kind of software that utilize the intelligent information technology and including artificial intelligence, and to provide various learning materials and support functions tailored to the abilities and the levels of individual students to support diverse, personalized learning opportunities. So I think the government is trying to develop some kind of software that help students learning and help teachers teaching. Yeah. So that, I mean, to my knowledge, my knowledge is very short, but I'm not a member of the developers. Yeah. So this is government driven. So if you want to know about this, I mean, deeply, I think I can find more materials from the Ministry of Education website.
Thank you so much, Lavinia and Houston. I think it would be actually great if you could share the resources in the chat box, because I'm also curious to actually find out more. I have a very quick question, and then I think we can conclude, because I don't see any other presentation from, questions from the participants. You are in charge of teacher education and development of teachers in the Wonju region, right? That's a big responsibility. It's a whole region, and also you are working directly with the government because it's associated with Ministry of Education. How do you balance in terms of taking initiatives, in terms of designing training courses for teachers, what government is trying to enforce, and also your views on the ethical stance of using AI in education, and how do you support teachers in that regard?
Actually, that is very tough task to me as well. Actually, so as I presented, the speed of implementing the AI technology into the classroom is very fast. So in the field, in the schools, actually, the teachers having a hard time to catch up with the advanced technology, especially for all the teachers. It's really hard to master those, I mean, all kind of tools and adapt to the new curriculum and new teaching method. Yeah, so I try to listen to the voices from teachers in the field, and if possible, I try to develop some kind of workshops or programs specifically for the teachers who are not very good at AI technology. Yeah, so that's the way I balance with the theory and field.
Thank you so much, Houston. I think you mentioned something very powerful as a teacher, educator, teacher trainer, trying to support teachers by looking out for voices from teachers and then really listening to them. I think that's a very good point that I think we all can agree on. And then also a very good point to end today's session as well. I think it's absolutely crucial that who we are working with, who we are trying to empower, we have to listen to them. We have to listen to them in a way where we understand their challenges and what they need so that we can support them better. I'm going to put up my slides very quickly to alert you about the, what's coming next, as well as the project proposal development. So please allow me to share my screen. So before closing the session, I just want to thank our final round of speakers for today. Thank you so much, Lavinia, Gabriela, Donesh, Selena, Guang, and Huson for such brilliant insights and also for actively responding to all the questions. And also, as today is the last session, a big thank you to all the speakers for all these 6 rounds. You have really created a very interactive dialogue phase through sharing your voices, opinions, as well as what's going on in your own institution. So we really hope that we'll be able to, based on these insights, move on for the next phase of this project. And on that note, next week, we have the project pitching and partnering, and very happy to share that we have already received 2 proposals well in advance before the deadline. So the pitching session will take place on Friday, 19th of July, and the amount of time allocated for each pitch we will share with you once we know how many projects are proposed and exactly how much time we have for each project pitching. So the deadline for proposing a project is a Monday, 15th of July. Please send send your project proposal to me by following the template that we have provided you. And if you want to join a project but don't want to propose a project, you don't have to do anything for now. Please look out for an email notification from us. Once we have all the projects, we will prepare the sign-up form for everybody, and then you can sign up for a project of your interest. Quick reminder again, 4 categories: research, curriculum, events, and wildcard. We have already received 1 on wildcard and 1 on curriculum so far. I'm looking forward to receiving more from you. And if you have any questions at all, or if you need any clarification, any support, I will try to respond to your queries as soon as possible to help you. So please don't hesitate to write to me. Then I will get back to you as fast as I can. I don't think we have time for question and answer, but a big thank you for staying a bit longer today. I know it's almost I think 20 minutes almost. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we are looking forward to meeting you for the cross-faculty project pitching and partnering session next Friday. Have a very lovely evening in Australia and a very good day in Europe and a very good evening also in Singapore and Asia. Thank you so much.